The Apple iPhone 14 is coming with some epic upgrades, and I'll be sharing the details right after this. So today we've got plenty of news on the specs and design of the upcoming iPhone 14 series. Before we get started though, please like the video if you're an Apple fan. Let me know in the comments what your most wanted feature for the iPhone 14 is, and if you haven't already, then hit subscribe now so you don't miss a thing in the future. So the iPhone 14 launch is almost a year away, but we've got a surprising amount of leaks coming in already. The predecessor has only just launched, and while it was a great phone with impressive specs, many were disappointed with the lack of changes from the 12. Now thankfully, for those of you that do want to see changes, the iPhone 14 is going to be very different than the previous iPhones. Now first up, we've got news of 2TB iPhone 14s coming, and this is in a new report from My Drivers. In their report, they advised that the iPhone 14 are going to be coming with new QLC flash storage, and this is going to allow them to increase capacity to a whopping 2TB. Now although Apple could do this, I just don't think they will. 512 has been the max for some time, and after making the jump to 1TB this year, I think it's going to stay the same for at least next year, and My Drivers are not the most reliable of sources. When it comes to the chipset powering the device, we know Apple had reserved 3nm chipsets from TSMC to make the A16 faster and more efficient than ever. Now unfortunately, due to the current chip shortage, TSMC have pushed back their 3nm chips in order to try and clear the backlog, so the Apple A16 that's going to be powering the iPhone 14 is likely going to be a 4nm chipset. While many complained that the 13 was too similar to the 12, when it comes to the iPhone 14, we're getting a complete redesign of the iPhone. One of the biggest changes is going to be the removal of the iPhone mini, and it's going to be replaced with a larger iPhone 14 instead. There's going to be 4 models of the iPhone 14, so we'll get a 6.1-inch iPhone 14, a 6.1-inch iPhone 14 Pro, we'll get a new 6.7-inch iPhone 14 Max, and then of course we've got the 6.7-inch iPhone 14 Pro Max. The minis have not been doing well in sales, and it was a surprise to see another mini this year. The introduction of the iPhone 14 Max allows people to have a bigger phone without having to pay for all the premium specs if they don't want them. We've also got a new investors report from JP Morgan Chase, and they state that the Pro models of the iPhone 14 are going to feature a new titanium alloy for the phone frames. They've previously had a stainless steel chassis, and the upgrade to titanium means it's less prone to scratching, it's more durable in terms of bending, and this is a great move considering titanium is both stronger and lighter than steel. The only downside is that fingerprint marks are more apparent, but Apple has been researching on how they're going to overcome this, and a patent was filed by Apple that shows a thin oxide coating for the surface to significantly reduce the fingerprints. As well as the new frame, we're getting a complete redesign on both the front and back of the iPhone 14. On the back, we're getting a similar layout to before, but the camera bump is being removed altogether, and the lenses are going to come straight out the back of the case. It's thought that these aren't going to protrude from the case, and that's the only real downside to the 12 and 13. The lenses poke out the back, so the phone won't sit flush on a table if it's placed on its back. We've also got a new research note from reliable analyst Ming-Chi Kuo, and he states that the wide camera is going to see an upgrade from the predecessor's 12 megapixel to a new 48 megapixel wide camera. Although iPhone cameras do perform well, it makes sense to now try and add more pixels to the primary camera just to deliver some high resolution images for those that need them. While no leaks have come through on the other cameras just yet, I would imagine they'll be sticking with 12 megapixel sensors. Ming-Chi Kuo also advises that we'll be getting a punch-hole camera on the front, and the notch is going to be removed altogether. This is exactly the same as John Prosser advised a couple of weeks ago, and it's looking very likely to be the case. Ming-Chi Kuo advises that the camera is going to be a punch-hole camera, but the Face ID sensors are going to be under the display, so what we're going to end up with is a phone that looks like this. We've also got display analyst Ross Young saying the same thing, and when it comes to Ross Young's track record, he's always correct. He's a display analyst that's been very reliable so far, and he only tends to post information when he's very sure about it. Now interestingly enough, a few people disagree. We had Ice Universe posting on Weibo to say that it's actually going to look something like this. But to be honest, with Ross Young, John Prosser and Ming-Chi Kuo all saying it's a punch hole and the under display Face ID, I'd be putting my money on that. After a relatively similar release though, it's refreshing to see some big changes in the iPhone 14, and there will of course be updates in iOS 16 as well. For those of you excited for the iPhone 14 though, we're now going to run through the expected specs, design and pricing for the whole of the series. To start with, the new entry-level model is going to be the iPhone 14. With the iPhone 14, we get a 6.1-inch Super Retina OLED display. It's expected to be a 90Hz display with an 1170 by 2532 resolution, and this gives us 460 pixels per inch. On the front, we get the first punch-hole selfie camera, which is likely to be a 12-megapixel wide-angle, and the Face ID sensors are going to be embedded under the display. On the rear, it's expected that they're going to stick with a dual camera setup, but it may be the first time we get a LiDAR scanner on the lower end models. The dual camera setup is going to consist of a wide angle and an ultra wide camera, and the phone is going to be powered by the new A16 Bionic, which is going to be a 4nm chipset that's both more powerful and efficient than the A15. It's going to be coming with 6GB of RAM and a choice of 128, 256 or 512 storage. The phone's going to be powered by a 3240 mAh battery with improved fast charging, likely to be something like 25 watts. It's expected to support both wireless and reverse wireless charging, and it's also expected to come with 5G, Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2 and ultra wideband support. It will of course ship with the new iOS 16. When it comes to pricing, Apple have been keeping things relatively the same lately, so we're expecting the base model to start from $799. Now next up, we've got the iPhone 14 Pro. With the iPhone 14 Pro, we get a 6.1-inch ProMotion OLED display. It's a 120Hz LTPO display with a resolution of 1170 by 2532, which gives us 440 pixels per inch. On the front, we get another 12-megapixel wide-angle camera with Face ID sensors embedded in the display. On the rear, we get a triple camera setup consisting of a 48-megapixel wide-angle as the primary, a 12-megapixel ultra-wide and a 12-megapixel telephoto, and of course we get the additional LiDAR scanner. The phone is going to be powered by the A16 Bionic, and it's expected that it's going to come with a choice of 8GB of RAM, 128, 256, 512 and 1TB of storage. The phone's going to be powered by a 3240 mAh battery with improved fast charging, likely to be 25 watts. It's expected to support both wireless and reverse wireless charging, and it's also expected to come with 5G, Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2 and ultra wideband support. It's going to ship with iOS 16, and the base model of the iPhone 14 Pro is expected to launch from $999. Now next up, we've got the new edition, which is the iPhone 14 Max. The iPhone 14 Max is expected to come with a 6.7-inch Super Retina OLED display. It's expected to be a 90Hz display with a resolution of 1284 by 2778. On the front, we get the 12-megapixel punch-hole selfie camera with Face ID sensors under the display, and then on the rear, we get a 12-megapixel wide angle as the primary, a 12-megapixel ultra-wide and the LiDAR scanner. The phone's going to be powered by the new A16 Bionic, and it should be coming with 6GB of RAM and a choice of 128, 256 or 512 storage. The iPhone 14 Max is going to be powered by a 4352 mAh battery, again with fast charging likely to be 25 watts. It's expected to support both wireless and reverse wireless charging, and it's also going to come with 5G, Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2 and ultra wideband support. Of course, it's going to be shipping with iOS 16. When it comes to pricing, we expect the iPhone 14 Max to start from $899. Now finally, we've got the top end model, the iPhone 14 Pro Max. The iPhone 14 Pro Max is coming with a 6.7-inch ProMotion OLED display. We're expecting a 120Hz LTPO display with a resolution of 1284 by 2778, giving us 458 pixels per inch. On the front, we get a 12-megapixel punch-hole selfie camera with Face ID under the display, and then on the rear it's the triple camera setup and a LiDAR scanner. The triple camera consists of a 48-megapixel wide angle, a 12-megapixel ultra-wide and a 12-megapixel telephoto. The phone's going to be powered by the A16 Bionic, dynamic, and it's expected that it's going to come with a choice of 8GB of RAM, 128, 256, 512 or 1TB storage. The phone's going to be powered by a 4352 mAh battery with improved fast charging likely to be 25 watts, and again it's likely to support both wireless and reverse wireless charging. It's expected to come with 5G, Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2 and ultra wideband support, and it will of course ship with iOS 16. The base model of the iPhone 14 Pro Max is expected to launch from $1,099, and of course the higher storage options will cost more. So overall, the iPhone 14 is looking incredible, and it's great to finally see some drastic design changes. In terms of the hardware, they've already got a good setup going, so focusing on design is a good move. Of course, the iPhone 14 series is going to be launching in September 22, and as more and more leaks come in, I'll continue to share them as they do. As always though, I'd like to know your thoughts in the comments, so who out there is excited for the iPhone 14 series, and you're happy to see the new iPhone 14 Max? But thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, smash a thumbs up. If you didn't, hit the thumbs down twice, and I'll see you guys in the next one.